The first thing I saw that morning wasn't the sunrise over my driveway. It was a bright orange violation notice taped directly across my front door like a criminal warrant. I stood there barefoot, coffee still warm in my hand, staring at the bold black letters. Final HOA notice. Immediate compliance required. At first, I honestly thought they had made a mistake. I lived in Oak Hollow Estates for nearly 6 years. I paid my dues on time every single month. I kept my lawn cut lower than half the neighborhood. My porch was clean. My fence was spotless. I never blasted music, never hosted loud parties, never caused problems. But there it was, a violation notice, and underneath it, a fine, $25,000. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so ridiculous my brain refused to process it. Then I read the reason. Unauthorized display of non-compliant flag in visible community area. My smile disappeared instantly. They were talking about the American flag hanging from my porch. The same flag my late father had folded and handed to me before he passed away. The same flag that had flown over his military unit overseas. The same flag that had hung outside my house every single day since I moved into Oak Hollow. I stared at the paper for a long moment before reading further. According to the notice, my flagpole exceeded approved HOA dimensions by 7 inches. 7 inches. Because of that technical violation, the HOA board had classified the display as non-compliant architectural modification. And according to the attached penalty schedule, they had stacked fines for nearly 5 months. 5 months. Without a single warning. Without a phone call. Without an email. Without even knocking on my door. The total sat there in bold red numbers. $25,000. I felt my chest tighten. Not from fear. From disbelief. I looked across the street and saw old Mr. Jenkins watering his lawn. The second our eyes met, he quickly looked away. That told me everything. The neighborhood already knew. I pulled the notice off my door and walked inside. My wife, Emily, looked up from the kitchen table. "You okay?" she asked. I dropped the paper in front of her. 30 seconds later, she looked at me with wide eyes. "You've got to be kidding me." I wish I was. She read it again. $25,000 over flag. Apparently 7 illegal inches of freedom. Normally that joke would have made her laugh. This time it didn't, because we both understood what this really was. This wasn't about a flagpole. This was about control. And everybody in Oak Hollow knew exactly who was behind it. Karen Whitmore, president of the HOA, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. Karen loved rules the way sharks love blood. She patrolled the streets in a white golf cart like a prison guard. She measured grass height with a ruler. She photographed trash cans left out past pickup time. She once fined a retired couple because their Christmas lights stayed up until January 3rd. Nobody challenged her, because Karen never backed down. And because the HOA attorney always sided with her. People paid the fines. People apologized. People stayed quiet. That was how Karen liked it. But this time, she picked the wrong house. I walked outside and looked up at the flag moving gently in the wind. My father used to stand in front of that exact flag every morning with his hand over his heart. Marine Corps. 2 tours overseas. Purple Heart recipient. He didn't talk much about war. But he respected that flag more than anything he owned. After his funeral, he gave it to me. "Take care of it," he said. I promised him I would. Now some HOA president wanted me to take it down because the pole was 7 inches too long. I clenched my jaw. No, absolutely not. An hour later, I drove directly to the HOA office. Karen's golf cart sat outside like a warning sign. I walked in carrying the violation notice. The receptionist barely looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, she's very busy. She can make time." Before the receptionist could answer, Karen appeared from the hallway wearing oversized sunglasses and a bright blue blazer. Even indoors, she crossed her arms immediately. "Can I help you?" "You fined me $25,000 over an American flag." Karen didn't blink. "No," she said calmly. "We fined you for violating HOA Architectural Code Section 8.4 subsection C. It's a flagpole. It's an unapproved structure. It's been there for 6 years. You failed to submit updated compliance documentation. I stared at her. You're serious? Completely. You could have warned me. We sent notices. I never got any notices. Karen shrugged. That sounds like a mailbox issue. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. I lowered my voice. You're really trying to squeeze 25 grand out of my family over a patriotic flag. Karen leaned slightly closer. The rules apply equally to everyone. No, they don't. Her smile vanished. I beg your pardon. I've seen half this neighborhood violating HOA rules. That's irrelevant. No, what's irrelevant is you pretending this has anything to do with community standards. The receptionist froze. Karen's face hardened. You have 14 days to comply before legal escalation begins. You're threatening me. I'm informing you. I laughed once. Cold. Sharp. You know what's funny? I said, my dad fought for that flag. Karen crossed her arms tighter. And my grandfather fought in Korea. This is not personal. Yes, it is. No, she snapped. What's personal is homeowners believing they're above the rules. Then she pointed toward the door. Good day, Mr. Carter. I left before I said something that would make matters worse. But the second I stepped outside, I saw neighbors watching from across the parking lot. Nobody said a word. Nobody moved, because everybody in Oak Hollow knew something ugly had just started. And none of them knew that Karen Whitmore had just made the biggest mistake of her entire HOA career. Because later that week, a man wearing an old military jacket would walk into the HOA meeting, and everything would change. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood knew about the fine. Oak Hollow spread gossip faster than wildfire, especially when Karen Whitmore was involved. I couldn't even check my mailbox without people staring. Some neighbors looked sympathetic. Others looked terrified, like if they spoke to me too long, Karen might find them too. That afternoon, my phone buzzed nonstop. Texts, calls, messages from people I barely knew. Most of them said the same thing. This is insane. But none of them wanted to say it publicly, because Karen had spent years building fear into the neighborhood. And fear is powerful, especially when people think they can lose their homes. Around dinner time, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Mr. Jenkins standing there holding a six-pack of soda. He looked nervous. Mind if I come in? 10 minutes later, he sat at my kitchen table shaking his head. She's gone too far this time. You think? She fined my daughter $300 because her kids drew chalk on the sidewalk. I stared at him. You paid it. What choice did we have? That sentence stuck with me. What choice did we have? That was exactly how Karen controlled people. Not with rules, with intimidation. Mr. Jenkins leaned closer. You're not the first person she targeted. What do you mean? She goes after people she thinks won't fight back. Why me? He hesitated, then quietly said, because your flag embarrassed her. I frowned. What? She wanted uniform decorative banners for the 4th of July committee. I blinked. You're kidding. You refused. Because he was right. Months earlier, Karen had tried replacing traditional American flags throughout the neighborhood with custom HOA-branded decorations. She called them community unity banners. Most residents hated them. I especially hated them. When Karen asked me to replace my father's military flag with one of her decorative banners, I laughed in her face. Apparently she never forgot it. Mr. Jenkins sighed. She's been waiting for a reason. Suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't enforcement. This was revenge. The next day, I started digging into HOA records. That was when things got interesting. Very interesting. I found dozens of unresolved violations throughout the neighborhood. Broken fences, illegal sheds, oversized RVs, unapproved paint colors. Most of them had no fines at all. But every homeowner Karen targeted personally. Massive penalties, aggressive legal threats, collections notices. I printed everything. Then Emily walked into my office carrying another envelope. Certified mail. From the HOA attorney. Inside was a legal demand threatening liens against our property if payment wasn't received immediately. Emily looked pale. They can't actually do this, can they? I didn't answer right away, because technically, yes, HOAs have enormous power, and Karen knew it. That night I barely slept, not because I was scared, because I was angry. At 7 a.m., another knock hit the door. This time it was someone I didn't recognize. An older man, mid-70s, tall, broad shoulders despite his age, gray military cap, sharp eyes. He looked like the kind of man who had seen things most people never could. "You Mark Carter?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He looked up at the flag, then back at me. "My name's Walter Reed." I froze, not because of the name, because of the jacket. United States Army Rangers, Vietnam veteran, Silver Star. He extended his hand. "Your father served with my brother." That stopped me cold. "What?" "I heard about the fine." I stepped aside immediately. "Please come in." An hour later, Walter sat across from me quietly listening while I explained everything. He never interrupted, never reacted, but the tie to his jaw became, the more I understood how furious he really was. Finally, he asked one question. "She fined you for the American flag?" "Yes, sir." Walter slowly nodded. Then he stood up. "When's the next HOA meeting?" "Thursday night." "Good." He reached for his jacket. "I'll be there." I didn't know exactly what he meant, but something in his voice told me Karen Whitmore had no idea what was coming. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I smiled. Thursday night arrived like a storm. The Oak Hollow clubhouse parking lot was overflowing before the meeting even started. That never happened. Normally HOA meetings were empty. People avoided them the same way people avoid jury duty. But not tonight. Tonight the neighborhood wanted a show, and Karen Whitmore was about to give them one. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked toward the building. "You ready?" she whispered. "No," I admitted, but I kept walking. Inside, nearly every chair was filled. People whispered nonstop. The second I entered, conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward me. Karen sat at the front table with the rest of the HOA board. Perfect posture, cold expression, stack of documents neatly arranged in front of her. The moment she saw me, her lips tightened. Then she noticed Walter Reed walking behind me, and something changed in her face. Not fear, confusion. Walter wore his old army jacket. Military pins covered the chest. His silver star gleamed under the lights. Even the room itself seemed quieter when he entered. Some people carry authority without saying a word. Walter was one of them. Karen adjusted her microphone. "This meeting will now come to order." Her voice sounded confident, but I noticed her fingers tapping nervously against the table. She started with budget reports, landscaping updates, pool maintenance. Nobody cared. Everybody waited for the real fight. Finally, Karen cleared her throat. Next agenda item, homeowner compliance issue involving property 214. That was my address. The room became dead silent. Karen looked directly at me. "Mr. Carter has repeatedly violated architectural regulations regarding an authorized flag display equipment." Murmurs spread instantly. Even hearing her say it out loud sounded ridiculous. Karen continued anyway. "Despite multiple notices, the homeowner has refused compliance." I stood up immediately. I never received multiple notices. Karen didn't look at me. "The association has documentation." "Then show it." She ignored that too. Current outstanding balance, including penalties and legal fees, totals $25,400. A chair suddenly scraped loudly across the floor. Walter Reed stood up. The entire room turned. Karen frowned. "So, public comments occur later in the meeting." Walter didn't sit down. Instead, he slowly walked toward the front. No rush, no anger, just calm purpose. "You find this man over the American flag." Karen straightened. "This matter concerns HOA compliance regulations." That wasn't my question. For the first time all night, Karen hesitated. Walter looked around the room. "My name is Walter Reed." Several veterans in the audience immediately recognized the name. You could see it in their faces. Walter continued, "I served this country for 26 years. Silence. My brother died under that flag. Now nobody moved, and this young man's father fought beside him. Karen forced a smile. We deeply respect military service, but community guidelines. Walter slammed his hand on the front table so hard the microphones jumped. Do not hide cowardice behind paperwork. The room exploded with whispers. Karen's face turned red. This behavior is inappropriate. No, Walter said quietly. What's inappropriate is threatening an American family over flag. One board member shifted uncomfortably. Another avoided eye contact completely. Walter turned toward the audience. How many of you have been fined unfairly? Hands slowly started rising. Then more. Then almost half the room. Karen looked stunned. Walter pointed directly at them. There's your problem. Karen grabbed her microphone tighter. This meeting is not a political platform. No, Walter replied. It's accountability. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out documents. A lot of documents. He placed them directly in front of Karen. I did some research. Karen glanced down. Her expression changed instantly. For the first time that night, she looked scared, because those papers weren't random. They were public records, selective enforcement complaints, unreported legal settlements, financial discrepancies, improper fine approvals, and signatures. Lots of signatures. Residents had been documenting Karen's abuse for years. They were simply too afraid to speak publicly. Until now. Walter leaned closer. You made one mistake. Karen swallowed hard. You picked a fight big enough that people finally stopped being afraid of you. The room erupted into applause. Karen slammed her gavel repeatedly. Order! Order! Nobody listened. Residents started shouting. She fined us too. She threatened Lynn's. She targeted my mother. You ignored every complaint. The board members looked horrified. One of them actually stood up and walked away from the table. Karen lost complete control of the room. And then Walter delivered the final blow. He looked directly at the HOA attorney sitting silently near the wall. Counselor, he said calmly, would you like me to explain selective enforcement law to this board, or would you prefer the federal court does it? The attorney immediately sat upright, because he understood exactly how dangerous the situation had become. Karen didn't. Not yet, but she would, very soon. The morning after the HOA meeting, Oak Hollow exploded. Not quietly, not privately, completely. Neighbors who had spent years staying silent suddenly started talking. Publicly, loudly. By 8 a.m., the community Facebook group looked like a battlefield. Residents posted screenshots, violation notices, emails, threat letters, stories people had been too intimidated to share before. And at the center of every complaint, Karen Whitmore. Emily sat beside me scrolling through the posts. Oh my God, she whispered. One woman revealed Karen fined her because her husband's wheelchair ramp was visually inconsistent. Another family posted evidence showing Karen approved violation for her personal friends while aggressively targeting everyone else. A retired teacher shared recordings of Karen threatening foreclosure over unpaid landscaping fines. The deeper people dug, the uglier things became. Then local news got involved. That changed everything. Around noon, a reporter from Channel 8 called asking for an interview. Apparently, someone leaked video footage from the HOA meeting, especially Walter's speech. The clip spread online like wildfire. Millions of views in less than 24 hours. People across the country were furious. Headlines started appearing everywhere. HOA fines family $25,000 over American flag. Veteran confronts HOA president during heated meeting. Residents accuse HOA board of abuse and selective enforcement. Karen's phone probably never stopped ringing. And things got even worse for her by Friday afternoon, because the HOA attorney resigned. Immediately, without warning. That alone terrified the board. Lawyers don't abandon paying clients unless they smell disaster coming. At 3 p.m., another emergency HOA meeting was announced. This time the clubhouse overflowed completely. People stood against walls, out in the hallway, even outside the doors. Karen entered looking nothing like the confident woman from 2 nights earlier. No bright blazer, no smug smile, No sunglasses. She looked exhausted, panicked, cornered. The second she sat down, residents started demanding answers. Where did the money go? Why were fines inconsistent? Why were records hidden? Why were legal threats issued without votes? Karen tried restoring order, but the power had shifted. People weren't scared anymore, and once fear disappears, bullies collapse fast. Then Walter Reed entered the room. The crowd immediately quieted, not because they had to, because they respected him. Walter walked straight to the front carrying another folder. He placed it gently on the table. I spoke with 3 attorneys today, he said calmly. Karen visibly swallowed. Walter continued. They are very interested in this neighborhood. A board member leaned toward Karen, whispering frantically. She ignored him. Big mistake. Walter opened the folder. Selective enforcement, financial misconduct, harassment, retaliatory penalties. Each word hit harder than the last. Then he looked directly at Karen. You didn't just abuse authority. He paused. You documented it. That line crushed the room, because it was true. Karen had been so arrogant for so long. She left a paper trail everywhere. Emails, meeting minutes, penalty records, internal board messages. And now residents were handing them over voluntarily. Karen finally snapped. This is a witch hunt. No, a woman shouted from the crowd. This is consequences. Applause erupted. Karen slammed the table. You people have no idea how difficult it is to maintain community standards. A man near the back laughed. Community standards? You fined me because my truck had dust on it. More shouting, more anger. Karen looked around desperately and realized nobody supported her anymore, not even the board. Then came the final twist. One of the HOA treasurers slowly stood up. Her voice shook. I think residents deserve to know. Karen turned instantly. Don't. Too late. The treasurer looked at the crowd. Karen approved thousands of dollars in legal spending without full board authorization. The room exploded. People started yelling over each other. Someone shouted, She used our HOA dues for personal revenge. Karen stood up abruptly. That is completely false. The treasurer held up printed records. No, it isn't. Karen's face went pale, and at that exact moment, I realized she finally understood. This wasn't about my flag anymore. This was about her entire empire collapsing in public, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. 3 days later, Oak Hollow held the largest HOA vote in community history. People lined up outside the clubhouse before sunrise. Some residents who had never attended a single HOA event suddenly showed up carrying folders full of complaints. Others brought neighbors, family members, even former residents. Nobody wanted to miss what was coming, because for the first time in years, Karen Whitmore looked vulnerable. The emergency vote had one purpose: remove Karen as HOA president, and judging by the mood outside the clubhouse, the outcome wasn't going to be close. Emily stood beside me as we walked toward the crowd. You nervous? She asked. A little. About what? I looked toward the entrance. People like Karen don't go down quietly. And I was right. Inside the meeting hall, Karen sat rigidly at the front table surrounded by stacks of paperwork. But this time she didn't look powerful. She looked desperate. Her attorney wasn't there. 2 board members had already resigned, and residents openly ignored her whenever she tried speaking. That alone told the whole story. The fear was gone. The meeting began with procedural rules. Karen repeatedly interrupted, objected, argued, demanded delays. But nobody cared anymore. Then residents started giving testimony, one after another. For nearly 2 hours, a military widow described Karen threatening legal action over a memorial bench. A father explained how Karen found his autistic son's chalk drawings. An elderly couple revealed they nearly lost their savings paying fabricated penalties. Every story made the room angrier, and Karen smaller. Then Walter Reed stood up. Silence hit instantly. Walter walked slowly to the microphone. No notes, no papers, just truth. I fought overseas with men who believed America meant freedom. The room listened carefully. Not power. He turned toward Karen. Not intimidation. Then he pointed toward the audience. A community is supposed to protect people. His voice hardened, not terrorize them. Karen tried interrupting. Walter ignored her completely. I've seen bullies before, he continued. Most of them eventually make the same mistake. He paused. They believe fear lasts forever. Nobody moved. Walter looked around the room. But eventually, ordinary people decide they've had enough. The crowd erupted into applause so loud the walls shook. Karen sat frozen, because deep down, she knew it was over. Then came the vote. Paper ballots. Volunteers counting by hand. The room buzzed with tension for nearly 20 minutes. Finally, the lead board member stood. He adjusted his glasses nervously, in accordance with community bylaws. Karen stared straight ahead. The vote to remove HOA President Karen Whitmore has passed. Thunderous applause exploded through the building. People stood, cheered. Some even cried. Karen didn't. She just sat there motionless. Then the board member continued. Additionally, the association formally withdraws all fines and legal actions against Mr. Mark Carter effective immediately. More applause. Emily grabbed my arm, smiling through tears. But the biggest shock came next. The board announced an independent audit, full financial review, legal review, internal investigation. Karen's head snapped upward, because now this wasn't just embarrassment. It could become criminal. She stood abruptly. This is insanity. Nobody answered. She looked around the room searching for support. There wasn't any. Not one person. Karen gathered her papers with shaking hands, then stormed toward the exit. But before she reached the door, Walter spoke one final time. Mrs. Whitmore. She stopped, slowly turned. Walter pointed toward the American flag hanging near the clubhouse stage. That flag belongs to every American. The room became silent again. You don't get to weaponize it against people. Karen said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. She walked out alone, and nobody followed her. A month later, Oak Hollow felt like a completely different neighborhood. The tension disappeared. People smiled again. Neighbors actually talked outside instead of rushing indoors the second an HOA golf cart appeared. Kids played basketball in driveways without parents panicking about fines. For the first time in years, the community felt like a community. The investigation into Karen Whitmore continued quietly in the background. Word spread fast. Misused HOA funds. Unauthorized legal expenses, selective enforcement, potential fraud. The deeper auditors looked, the uglier things became. Karen moved out before summer even started. Most people didn't feel sorry for her. Some did, but nearly everyone agreed on one thing. She caused her own downfall. The new HOA board immediately passed major reforms. Transparent voting, public financial records, limitations on fines, mandatory warning notices, independent review procedures, and one symbolic rule that made the entire neighborhood clap during the meeting. No resident could ever be fined for displaying the American flag again. Not for size, not for placement, not for visual inconsistency. Never again. Walter Reed attended that meeting too. When the vote passed, he simply nodded quietly, like a soldier finishing one final mission. A week later, I invited Walter over for dinner. He stood in my driveway, staring up at the flag moving gently in the wind. You kept it flying, he said. Always will. He smiled slightly. You know your father would have been proud of you. That hit harder than I expected, because throughout this entire fight, that was the only thing that truly mattered to me. Not the HOA, not the fines, not the news coverage, not Karen. My father taught me something important when I was young. Bullies survive when decent people stay quiet. And for years, that neighborhood stayed quiet, until one ridiculous fine pushed everybody too far. Sometimes all it takes is one moment, one unfair action, one person finally saying enough. After dinner, Walter handed me a small folded piece of paper. Inside was an old black and white photo. My father, young, standing beside Walter's brother overseas, both smiling, both exhausted, both alive. I stared at the picture, speechless. Walter placed a hand on my shoulder. Men like them fought so Americans could stand proudly under that flag. He looked toward the porch. not so petty tyrants could control people with it. That night, after Walter left, I stood outside alone. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. The flag moved softly above me under the porch light, and for the first time in weeks, I finally felt calm. Then I noticed something across the street. Mr. Jenkins slowly walking toward his porch carrying a brand new American flag. Next door, another neighbor hung one too. Then another, and another. By the end of the week, American flags flew across Oak Hollow Estates. Not because the HOA demanded it, not because anyone was forced, but because people finally remembered something Karen forgot. Communities aren't built through fear. They are built through respect. And every morning after that, I'd walk outside with coffee in my hand, look up at my father's flag, and smile, because after everything that happened, the flag still flew, and always would,